but the amount of harm that we as people armed with AI can
Right.
do, even whether it's social or even potentially physical. I think that to me is the big, much bigger potential risk, especially as we move into election season. When I see the most seasoned experts, the majority of the AI experts that are in the field, to me, the thing they're pointing to is, okay, there's a human abuse of AI risk here more than anything.
Hey, friends, welcome to The Good Life with Michele Lamoureux, a show for women in midlife who want to live happier, healthier, and more meaningful lives. I'm your host, Michele Lamoureux, a self-love coach and the author of Design a Life You Love. And together we're going to be doing just that. Each week, I bring on world-class experts, best-selling authors, leading entrepreneurs, and also do solo casts with the intention of inviting you to get connected to what you really desire from your life. This show is produced with love every week. There's inspiration and actionable tips in every episode because I want to see women playing a starring role in their lives instead of living on the sidelines. Be sure to join the Good Life community newsletter over at thegoodlifecoach.com for more inspiration and tips to live your best midlife. And make sure you're following the show on your favorite podcast player. I'm so glad that you're here. Hey friends, welcome back to the Good Life with Michele Lamoureux podcast. Today we are talking about artificial intelligence. I think there's a lot of confusion about what role it's going to play in our lives because it is here and it's going to be in every aspect of our lives, whether we like it or not. What are the pros and cons? What does it mean for humanity? I can see so many benefits, but I also have my reservations around it playing a role in spaces like the arts. So what does that future look like for us, for our children, for humanity? What is this thing called the singularity, which is when AI in the future could become self-aware and then take over? Is that a real risk? These are some of the questions and concepts that we cover in today's interview with an expert on AI. Joining us is Brian Evergreen. He's best known for his work advising Fortune 500 executives on artificial intelligence strategy and building on his experiences working at Accenture, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft. Brian guest lectures at Purdue University and the Kellogg School of Management and is a senior fellow in the Economy, Strategy, and Finance Center of the Conference Board, sharing the unconventional and innovative methods and frameworks he developed leading and advising digital transformation initiatives at many of the world's most valuable companies. Brian is the founder of the Profitable Good Company, a leadership advisory company that partners with and equips leaders to harness the economic and societal potential of technology in the era of artificial intelligence. He's the author of Autonomous Transformation, Creating a More Human Future in the Era of AI. I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. It changed the way I was thinking about AI. And I think that's why it's important to have an expert on to really understand the true pros and cons and the way it actually works. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure to share it with a friend and follow on your favorite podcast player. On that note, let's get into the show. Here we go. Brian, AI, this is like, we can't ignore it. It's here, it's been here, and it's going to be incorporated into pretty much every facet of our lives. But I think there's a lot of confusion. I personally can see the pros, and I also have a lot of fear around it. And I'm really excited to have your expertise to help us unpack where should we be optimistic, where should we be looking for ways to make sure it doesn't go down a bad road, if to the degree we have any control of that, and just to understand how it all works and the role it's going to play in our lives.
Great question. I can understand the fear. I think that a lot of people we're in a we're in a place, I think, as a society where there is a lot of unknown. And I think that, there's a link actually that scientists have found between physical, that when you have uncertainty, they've linked it to actual, like, the where your brain feels it is the same place as physical pain. So we actually experience uncertainty as physical pain. And so I think that, and it is uncertain. The future is, I mean, it's always uncertain, but especially now that we have different elements that we can, it's easy to imagine, especially all the decades of science fiction films that we've seen. It's easy for us, as very imaginative and creative people, to think of all the ways that things could go wrong. And so I guess for me, one of the things that I always share as sort of, you know, as a grounding principle, is that helps me anyway, is that um, between here and that future is an unbelievable amount of human decisions. So the machines themselves aren't just going to suddenly take over. It in any given company, in any given societal aspect that we're experiencing, there would have to be a person, a leader, and a committee of leaders that say, okay, yes, we are now going to put this system into place to do this thing. And I'm hopeful. And one of the things I'm working on is helping equip those leaders with, I think we need to be more purposeful. I think we sort of screwed up in the last, the big era of digital transformation, and the ways that social media sort of just rolled out without necessarily a lot of intention and design from, like, what will society look like
Yes.
at the end of this road. And so I'm hopeful that we can be a little bit more intentional this time.
I do too. I do too. I think it depends on who's crafting it and what their intentions are. And I'm going to try not to take a cynical approach because I'm a very optimistic person, but I just feel like if there's an ability to profit, shareholders and profitability for leadership may take priority over humans and their livelihood and how the repercussions of that. Again, I am an optimistic person. I think that that's a reality. We see it in businesses all the time.
Yeah, there is. I think profit has been. I think a lot of people see things a little bit binary in terms of they'll see a profitable option in front of them, where on the other side of that profitable choice is some kind of social. Maybe it's a social harm. Maybe it's just maybe it's job loss. That they could rationalize to themselves that, okay, well, we had to make that decision because of this or that reason. But I often think of the whole business landscape as sort of like a chessboard because of my background. And I think a lot of times people are looking at this one piece and this one move and thinking that's profitable, so I need to do it. But I think there's a lot of ways that business leaders can get a little bit more creative. Like, for instance, when we look at jobs, like, you can save money by cutting costs, by cutting jobs, but you could make, especially with AI, like, you can make, if you focus on top line revenue and creating more value for your customers and clients, you could actually make exponentially more and be in a spot where you suddenly need to hire a whole bunch more people and for high value jobs. So I think that it's those that enter this era and end up just cutting costs by eliminating jobs, to me, are not really seeing the potential of the technology and not necessarily seeing the whole board, and they're sort of maybe in sort of a fixed mindset.
Right. And that is the work you do when you go into corporations. I mean, your
Mhm.
title is Autonomous Transformation, Creating a More Human Future in the Era of AI. And that makes me optimistic. I like that framing. Tell us, what is autonomous transformation?
So we've been on this journey from analog to digital for the last 30 years. And in my work at Microsoft and previously, I started to feel like there's a new sort of something around the corner from digital transformation. Digital transformation to me it's just the opening. It's not the end game, so to speak. And so if moving from analog to digital being the mile marker, what's that next mile marker? And to me, that's autonomy or autonomous systems that can make decisions without humans in the loop. And so autonomous transformation is moving the basically similar to the way digital transformation transformed us from the analog to digital world. I believe that autonomous transformation will transform our society and our workplaces from the digital and in some places analog to a more autonomous world.
Okay. And tell us, just for anyone who's like, okay, I heard of artificial intelligence. Of course, I know what AI is to some degree. Give us what is AI? How does it get smarter? Does it need humans to feed it? Is it an open source technology that anyone can tap into and then expand upon? Like I'd love to just know a little bit more about how it gets smarter and is so, they talk about it growing, exponentially smarter in such short
Mhm.
periods of time. So explain that to us.
Yeah, so AI fundamentally, I mean, the discipline was founded in the 50s of the last century, and the goal was to pursue, can we recreate, something that seems like human level intelligence in terms of executing tasks, ultimately to serve, humankind was the goal. And I think it was maybe Dartmouth or Princeton or one of these places. They all came together for a conference and said, okay, how are we going to make our world better with these machines? And so that's sort of the start of the discipline. And ultimately, there at this point where we've gotten to, there's 20, I believe it's 26 categories, according to Gartner anyway, that are of AI systems. And so, in terms of your question of what it is, ultimately, the way that I would describe it is that you're using a model, some kind of algorithm, to be able to predict, to input. It takes in some kind of input of information, and then leveraging a model, then it predicts or makes some kind of output that's an answer based off of the input and based off of the correlation between in whatever it was trained. And so in the case of generative AI, it was trained on billions and billions of words and lots of text. So it's predicting the next word at any given point based on weighted probabilities and just a lot of math being applied really fast. And so in terms of how it gets smarter, to your question there, you used a few phrases that I'll just, I'm going to be challenge you directly and say that you're personifying it a little bit, because you said like we feed it and it gets smarter. So I just want to it's easy for us, I think, to fall into that, and that's so much of how the media talks about it. But
Yes.
it's not like a personified thing. It's literally just like think of like a data center with like blinking lights. That's it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so in terms of the way that these algorithms improve is that, we have either you improve the model and come up with better ways of applying, algorithms is one way. And the other way is by putting in better data and having it, have better. So that's one reason with GPT-4 was so much better than GPT-3 is yes, they made improvements to the algorithm, but they also put in a whole bunch more data. And that's part of what made it so strong. I think they're nearing the limits of the amount of human data, human generated data that you can put into one of those. So the idea that we're going to keep exponentially improving, I think, is a little bit of there's a failed premise there. I think that the curve of AI growth that we've seen is like a snapshot of an S curve. If you've ever seen Red Factfulness by Hans Rosling, I think that we're in an S curve. And so you can look at right now and go, oh my gosh, this is a hockey stick. And I joke, I have a 5-year-old, and I joke that I actually I actually said, okay, I use ChatGPT. I went in, I've got ChatGPT Plus, and I said, hey, my 5-year-old is this tall, and this is how many inches he's grown, every single year since he was born. This is where he started. This is how many inches. How tall is he going to be when he's 18? And it didn't. It's funny. I was curious if ChatGPT would recognize well, it's going to even out, right? Like how tall are you and things like that. Instead, it just applied the math directly, like I hoped it would, and it apparently he's going to be over 18 feet tall. Or something like that, some kind of insane number, right? That we know as people, we laugh, right? We know
Yes.
that's not true because it's an S curve. But if I could make the argument that, look, I have 5 years of historical data on my son, and I can show you his growth curve. That's, I can prove to you mathematically that he should be able to be 18 feet tall. And yet we know as people that it's going to be an S curve. And so I think that's what's happening is that people are looking and saying, oh my gosh, look at the last couple of years of progress. That means we're headed here. And for me, I say, it's actually an S curve. And so I think if anything, we'll get better and better at finding ways to apply it that and create value. But the idea that the systems are going to continue to, to improve at the rate that that we've this little snapshot that we've seen just really since 2020, December 2022. So it's been like a year and a half. And so I think people are making a lot of extrapolations off a very small amount of time.
Okay. So there's so much I want to unpack here. And I'm going to start in one area that's more sort of big picture, and then we'll go back to granular a little bit more. I have been following and paying attention to, so I listen to a lot of business podcasts. I love entrepreneurship. I love business. I love the idea of growth. I love the idea of possibilities. You talk about creating a more human future. Love all of that. When I hear Elon Musk or Mo Gaudat and Ray Kurzweil, he was at South SXSW, the conference.
South by Southwest.
Yeah, South by Southwest. So he's been apparently working on this for 61 years. And I happened to be watching, a YouTube video of his interview when he was there. And he's talking about being able to capture everything in people's brains by 2045. And it seems like there's some people out there who, and Elon's got the Neuralink, which is putting the chips, which I know is to help people with disabilities for now, but who are really going to be able to, who can control computers with their brains. That doesn't seem that far off based on the way they're talking. And not Ray, but Elon, Mo Gaudat, and the gentleman who's known as the grandfather of AI, Jeff Hinton, resigned from Google so he could talk more about what he sees as the dangers. When I see people who are so integrated, who have helped create this technology, who are innovating it, like you see Elon warning of the dangers, and yet also like creating the self-driving cars and the robots that he's saying everyone's going to have in their house that is going to live with them and do all the tasks that, maybe they don't want to do. When you're just, an everyday person kind of watching all this, it's hard to discern how much of that warning signal we should be paying attention to and how excited we should be. You know what I mean? And it seems to me some of these guys, like Ray, I get the sense he wants to, live 500. He's talking about living 500 years. I don't care about that. I care about the soul and humanity. That's what I care about. So help us understand this. Because like I said, I've been paying attention to it. And when somebody is calling out warning flags who's involved in creating it, I'm thinking, I remember Elon Musk talking about, he said, I was trying to warn Obama, like, we're going too fast with this. And, there's ethical issues involved. So I know that's a bigger thing, but give us your lens on this.
So it's a big question, and there's a lot to unpack. And so I'm going to do my best to unpack as much as I can, and without going on taking up the rest of our time, because it's a complicated topic. And so Elon Musk has been, I think, is from what I understand, influenced by some of the writers, and I'm going to say, for those seeing the video, you'll see the bunny ears, researchers. That are called AI researchers, but there's a funny little thing when you look into their background, which is that they've never worked in the field of AI. So their version of AI research is, if I start with the premise that AI has broken loose and it's now in control of the world, what are all the things that could go wrong? What are all the things it would do? What are all the bad things that would happen? And what are the ways that we should, can hopefully fight back or stop it or whatever. And then working backwards from that, what sorts of fail safes should we have? One of these people has been recognized, and I think did a TED Talk, wrote an article for Time magazine about bombing data centers, who has zero technology background. Like, he has never worked for any tech company. Like, he's been an AI researcher, but he's been doing some really great science fiction work for a long time. and yet he's being recognized as an, and in this moment of AI, it was kind of a perfect spot for him to come to come to the fore and get even more. He already had a following, and there's sort of this movement of folks that are, that think that they see what the future holds in that direction. And again, it's a combination of not seeing that it's an S curve in terms of the trajectory, which makes sense because they're not a part of the field for that half of it. I'll get to the Jeff Hinton side later. And then there's also another gentleman that is an MIT researcher. So when you hear that, you probably think, I mean, I know you mentioned your husband graduated from MIT,
My
right?
brother,
Oh,
yeah,
brother,
his
sorry.
MBA.
Okay.
Yeah.
So MIT is an incredible institution.
Yeah.
This gentleman in particular has received many awards for being an astrophysicist, and he's an astrophysics professor, which already, as we know, is kind of a metaphysical discipline. And then he got interested in AI and received a grant to do AI research. But again, that's different than somebody coming out of the actual field and in terms of what AI research is. And so I think we have this appeal to authority fallacy where you see MIT, you see AI research, and you're like, that's the expert. You see AI researcher, Time Magazine must be the expert. And then when you unpack it a little bit further, you realize, oh, maybe that person's not an expert, and maybe they're actually, doing their best to try to figure this out, like we all are. And they're being given the microphone. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's like the gospel, or like not, I don't know the right word to say, but like, the truth of the matter.
Yes.
And so that's the first sort of piece of it. And so then you see folks like Elon Musk. He's been heavily influenced by folks that are in that, as I understand. I don't know Elon Musk, but as I've read and understand, and based on his associations with those particular people, it seems like he's influenced by their ideas, which makes sense. And then in terms of Neuralink, the thing that I think about when I see things like Neuralink is I agree. To me, the idea of us all having chips in our brain is very dystopian. And I know there's some people who are thinking, oh, but we'll be able to do so much more. Imagine you have the whole internet, blah, blah, blah. Like your reaction, my reaction, probably if we went out and we interviewed 1,000 people and said, would you do it? Even if it was going to make you allegedly smarter, would you do it? And I think that most people wouldn't do it. And that's one thing I think is easy for us to forget when we're looking at this, is to say, because of the fact that someone's building something does not mean, like, I know we were all worried when Meta came out with these, and now Apple Vision Pro as another example, with these like big, things that you're putting a screen on your face of, like, oh my gosh, what's that? Are we moving toward a Ready Player One world where none of us are ever having in-person interaction, and we're and we're all just going to be, in the metaverse? And I think that was a genuine fear 2 years ago. Yeah. And then the market just didn't buy it. Nobody wanted it, right? I mean, not nobody, I don't want to, but enough to really get a critical mass. So when you think about like getting brain surgery and implanting a chip in your brain, I think even fewer people are actually, very, very few. I maybe, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that the majority of people are going to say, no, thank you. Even if there's some alleged benefit, I'm gonna put my bet on humanity. And then in terms of, and I think the same will be true for the idea of like how robots are adopted in homes and things like that, because people are unplugging and throwing away their Amazon Echoes because they don't like the idea of Amazon listening to what's going on in their house. And so why would they then go invest in having a robot that is, coming in, and unless there's, a lot of assurances from a security and safety perspective. But I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what the market does. But and then in terms of Jeff Hinton, I don't know him personally. From what I've seen from his comments, I think that, to me, the way that I interpret his concerns is more about the idea of, and I think that his concerns and then those other AI researchers I mentioned have been conflicting.
Yes.
Because it's sort of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So it's like the fellow enemy of moving forward. Let's come together. Let's write open letters. Let's tell everyone to stop. And then to your point, like Elon continued anyway, which is interesting. And
right. He's spearheading that, and then he's like, "But I'm going to grow it, and I'm developing ChatGPT, and I'm now OpenAI." Yeah.
Exactly. I think that was more of a commercial drive than a societal
Yes.
thing for him. But I think that from what I interpret from the Jeff Hinton side of things is the amount of social harm, like what we saw with Taylor, the photos that people made of Taylor Swift on Twitter. There was, I don't, I guess you didn't see them. There were some really inappropriate. I actually didn't see them. I read about it, but some really inappropriate photos that were made of her leveraging deepfakes in compromising sorts of things. I
Oh,
won't describe any further than that. But the amount of harm that we as people armed with AI can
right.
do, even whether it's social or even potentially physical. I think that to me is the much bigger
Yeah.
potential risk, especially as we move into election season.
Yes.
That's the when I see the most seasoned experts, the majority of the actual the AI experts that are in the field, to me the thing they're pointing to is, okay, there's a human risk, like human abuse of AI risk here more than anything. And many of the leading voices, one of them is Andrew Ng, you may be familiar, or those, he's one of the sort of leaders of the discipline, who says that he sees no path from where we are today to the idea of super intelligence, where AI is sentient and is
Yes. The
taking over. Like there's
singularity.
no,
That's no.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
no logical path. I know that there's people that those AI researchers
Yeah.
that are
Ray and Mo. Yeah. The
starting with that
singularity
leap.
they talk about. And it's like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
creepy. This idea that it's
It's
going to,
extremely creepy. Yeah, it is. But there's no logical path. Think of it this way. Like if we don't even know, like if you took all the leading scientists of the world today and you put them in a room and you said, come up with draw on the whiteboard or the chalkboard, chalkboard is more scientific, right? Draw on the chalkboard, like what's the formula for human cognition? Like how does our brain work? Like, no, they can't do it. They can't answer it. So the idea that we're going to accidentally stimulate consciousness that is at the same level of thinking that we as humans have, by putting more data into a machine, leveraging some kind of algorithm, like you don't, it just is a non-scientific premise. Like there's no scientific path from where we are today to the idea that we're going to accidentally create consciousness by having a little bit more compute power. It's a false equivalent. It's a non sequitur, right, in terms of logical
I love
fallacies.
this. Yes.
So, there's no, if you take, if by adding more data, for example,
Yeah.
into a system, how that's not going to spark that, like suddenly, cogito ergo sum, I'm aware of myself now and I'm going to start setting my own goals because I have
Right.
a bit more data. That was what
Right.
I did,
Yeah.
right? Like
Humans are bad, must exterminate the humans. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So like a poorly programmed machine where someone said, keep this, maybe in an agricultural setting, like, okay, keep anything off of this crop because, we don't want anything dangerous. And you, for some reason, equip that with weapons. And then a human's not aware that it has that command and walks into the field, mate, like that, but that's a human mistake. That's not that the
Uh,
machine has like taken over, right? And like somehow become cognitive. So to me, it's human error, human intentional harm or accidental harm with these systems is the only threat that I see on the horizon.
okay. And I wasn't even necessarily going to go there, but then when you mentioned that, and I am so appreciative of this conversation because, you're like, think about the way that it's being personified. And then, and I'm using language, like you said, feeding it. So it's programmed.
It's programmed. It's just a machine
Let's
like all
just,
the other
yeah,
machines.
it's
Yeah.
technology, it's programmed.
Yep.
And
And the
that,
majority of the images we see of it in
yes,
the news are
yeah,
like made up humanoid robots that don't even exist. So it's just like truly we're kind of conflating science fiction with the real world. The majority of when you see pictures of AI, like if I wrote an article
yeah,
for a given and I didn't choose what I wanted the cover one to
yeah.
be, I almost guarantee you any major publication today would put in some kind of crazy futuristic looking humanoid robot that's generated by AI that isn't a representation of an actual robot that exists today. It's just a science fiction, right? Even if I'm right, but really AI in the majority of cases, like OpenAI itself, it's not personified. It is not in a humanoid robot. It's actually, it's in a server. It's servers in a data center, or several data centers, I'm sure. These little boxes with blinking lights, like that's all it is. But that doesn't get you, people don't click on that, right? And so you're not as likely to see it
Clickbait.
we visualize that way. Yeah. But that's all AI, those forms of AI. Robotics is a whole different discipline, and AI can be combined with robotics to create interesting applications, and for
Right.
robotics to learn instead of being physically programmed for things, or
Right.
explicitly programmed. But AI doesn't. I think sometimes people see AI equaling robotics, and
Two
that's not
separate
the case
things. I
either. Yeah.
appreciate you making that distinction too, because there's a company, I think Boston something,
Dynamics. Yeah.
Dynamics. Yeah, they have like the Digita dog or whatever that's in New York now,
Yes.
helping the police. And my friend had
Hmm.
seen it when she was there. She's like, I saw this like robot thing. So that's separate. So that's actually really another important distinction, which is why I'm
Hmm.
so grateful you're educating us. Tell us, actually, you mentioned in the book Jessica Alba's Honest Company in the
Hmm.
book. I heard her actually on a podcast, and she's like, she's seeing it, I think, in this way that maybe you're talking about, where we optimize the tech through the AI so that we can do more of what allows us to be more human, while the text can
Yeah.
take on some of these other roles. And and when she said that, I remember thinking, I like that framing, but that's not, like you
Hmm.
said, that's not what we're hearing. There's more of the
No.
fear mongering. And I should know
Yeah.
that with media, there's more of the fear mongering.
Yeah.
Tell us about your experience with AI, because I know you mastered in music and composition, which I love, as a parent of a child who's very artistic, plays multiple instruments, and like in
Awesome.
getting into film and is so creative. Because I want to talk about the applications in the arts, because I'd love your thoughts on this. But how did you get into AI?
So my journey from music to AI was that I had been teaching kids chess actually first. So I started getting I used to represent the US versus other countries in chess. I played against, if you ever saw Searching for Bobby Fischer, I played against Josh Waitzkin in real life, the boy the movie was about. And so that's sort of my claim to fame from that time. And then I retired at 12 and started
Oh
giving
my
private
gosh,
lessons.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, because it was either I had a choice. I had to choose between being homeschooled, doing chess full time, or going to school and doing sports and being around other kids. And I wanted to do that.
Yeah,
So I retired, and I started teaching private lessons. And so and then my brother and I, when I was 17, we started a company teaching in schools as opposed to just private lessons. And then by the time I graduated college, I think we were in about 200 schools, and then a couple of
amazing.
years later, we about doubled it. And so then I was getting business experience all along the way while studying music. I actually was double majoring in music and business, and then I dropped the business major because I was like, I'm getting a real world MBA in a way.
Totally.
And I wanted, in a way, school ended up being kind of like where I went to relax and study and learn the things that were just fun for me. Uh,
Yes.
and so, and I was hoping I actually sing. That was my main instrument, piano and singing. But I was hoping that, I was in school in LA. So I was hoping to be, was his name David Foster discovered Josh Groban and then Michael Bublé. And I was, like
Oh, next.
hoping I would be the third. Yeah. Just
Yes, Brian, there you
make it a
are. Yes.
trio. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
There's still time, Brian. There's still time. Don't
I'm
give
not
up
holding
on
out
that.
for it. Yeah. But yeah, so then when my brother and I decided, I felt like the future, because what we were doing at the time was we had these 400 schools, and we were sending all of these, we were hiring local college students and then sending them to teach. And we had a curriculum, it was gamified, like levels and all of that. And then I felt like it was too much to manage. Like I was the one managing
Mm,
operations, and
yeah.
what would happen? College students are not the most reliable workforce, and not necessarily their fault. I mean, it's just kind of the context they're in too. And so
Yes.
we had all these creative strategies around having multiple backups for different areas that could pivot to. We paid them to be available during that time, even if they weren't going to a school, because we're like, we just
Yes.
need the capacity.
Yeah.
It was a logistical nightmare. And so I thought we should move in and create a digital offering and sell it to the districts. And we had a disagreement about kind of where the future of the company was headed. So I thought I'll go do something else. And I went
Mm.
on. Someone told me that there's this thing called LinkedIn, and you could go meet people. And I found I just messaged people in consulting, and long story short, that's actually how I ended up at Accenture.
Oh,
Someone just
wow.
gave me a shot as somebody they'd never met before and said, you can
Wow.
come in as a contractor helping us with this one little problem. And I joined and I helped with that, it was related to staffing. And I felt like I learned quickly that there was a lot of redundancies in the systems they were using, even though I didn't have necessarily like a computer programming background or anything like that.
Mm.
And then I thought, how there must be a way, to solve this. So I Googled and I found out there was this thing called SharePoint workflows, and that we could automate, like, I don't remember what percentage, but like in the double digits, like 20 or
Wow.
40% of the work that was being done was copy pasting that could just be automated through workflows. And so I did that. And then they offered me a full-time job. And then my first full-time job gig ever was for Microsoft as a client. And they asked me if I wanted, the person was kind of, he was an incredible leader. He basically threw me into the deep end, sink or swim kind of situation.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm quarterbacking this answer to Microsoft on um, yeah, a product decision that they were considering. And they were flying in VPs from Avanade and managing partners from Accenture and all of that. And I was this new hire that was in charge of kind of pulling it together to a cohesive story and narrative to be able to pitch back to Microsoft. Um, and so, yeah, so that was how and then it was related to analytics. And so then I went and took Andrew Ng. I mentioned him earlier. I took his course on Coursera, which was kind of the entry point a lot of people I think at that time had into getting into machine learning. And this is before everyone was kind of calling it AI again. I think we are just talking
Machine
about it as
learning.
advanced analytics and yeah,
Yeah.
machine learning.
Or analytics.
And
Yeah.
then I networked with an Accenture to the people that were working in that space, and then I got an opportunity where I ended up leading, a small, more of the lower level analytics, like business intelligence project. And then when that went well, I was able to secure funding to bring on a data scientist. And then when that went well, right, like it just sort of continued to gain momentum. And fast forward a few years, and I ended up I had built systems that were deployed at AWS, at Microsoft, that they were using internally across, either whole organizations or the whole company. And then Microsoft, one of my clients, moved into a new position and hired me as the US AI strategy lead, which was
Wow.
another sink or swim, because then I'd been more building and on the practitioner side.
Yes.
This was them saying, hey, next week you're flying to this Fortune 500, company based in Minnesota, and you're meeting with their C-suite team to talk about AI strategy and the future of their market and their company. And then the next week after that, it's this other one in, Charlotte, and then after that, it's in Detroit, and all C-suite teams. And so it was another sink or swim, evolve quickly kind of situation. And fortunately, it rose to the challenge, I think, and the work that I did there ended up becoming a blueprint, because I was the US AI strategy lead. So the work I did there became a blueprint globally, and I was asked to train the other strategy leads on the work that I'd been doing, which was, I think, a good sign. So long story short, that's sort of the sort of a linear path that I took to get from music to working in AI at Microsoft.
Well, I love that you're working in AI because I love your lens on it. And when you were talking about your path, I could see how I could see the distinction that you're talking about too, because you're using innovation, creativity, your humanness to then
Mhm.
use the machines to optimize processes or systems to ultimately help their bottom line. But it's not necessarily erasing people
Right,
necessarily the way that you're
right.
doing it. So talk to us about how AI is transforming the workplace. We hear
Mhm.
about AI, people are losing their jobs or it's coming for your job. So should we be worried? Like, where do you see
Great
it going?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is AI, in the history of the world, AI has never taken anyone's job. And even the ones where they say, oh, we've replaced people with AI, like the customer service ones,
Yeah.
I just want to like call out, and you might, roll your eyes at me that this is a nuance, but AI didn't show up at that company, knock on the door and say, I can do this 700 customer service people's job. AI
We're
didn't take their job.
personifying it, right? It's
Yeah,
like
those
they didn't apply
leaders.
for it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah,
leader, yeah, the
yeah.
leaders in that company made a decision that, hey, we
Yes.
can cut costs if we do this.
That's yeah.
And so that's the first thing is like, people say AI is coming. AI is not coming anywhere. AI is just a disembodied system that, it's a tool. So it's like saying hammers are coming to build a house or like destroy your house. And it's like, well, people could pick up a hammer and destroy my house, but hammers aren't just coming. AI isn't just coming, right? So
Okay.
that's the first
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
And I say it to everyone because everyone, even like colleagues in tech, say the same phrase. So it's
Yeah.
not,
Feeding, coming. Yeah. They're
yeah, yeah,
feeding it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the first thing. Then the second thing I'll say is that the work that I've been doing in AI for years has been augmenting the human capability. So I'll give you, and the majority of even the most advanced, like because I told you about my role in Microsoft US, but later I was in Microsoft Research working on some more emerging AI capabilities that weren't generative AI related. But one of them was creating autonomous systems that can autonomously control machines or processes and things like that. And then automatically raises the question of like, oh, wait, doesn't that mean you don't, you don't need people anymore? And
Right.
what was interesting about the work we were doing was more like, for instance, Dow Chemical is a great example. And this isn't one I worked on, but I think it's a good example of the principle, which is they have these giant vats filled with all these chemicals. And when they want to do their inspections, they drain the vats. They had, men or women in the factories put on hazmat suits because, they can't be exposed to those chemicals. They go
Right.
inside of the vats and they perform various inspections and then they come back out and then they refill them and then they go back to work. So that it's costing time. There's a human, safety risk, et
For
cetera.
sure. Yeah.
And so what they came up with is they figured out that they could have these, drones that they could just drop into the vats that can just inspect them without ever having to stop production, no risk to human
Wow.
safety. Those people didn't lose their job. Their job wasn't that one like task
Task.
of going and
Yeah.
checking in. And so it improved the quality of work. It lowered
Wow.
the risk to humans inside of the factory. Same thing with another one. This one the group I was a part of, I wasn't directly involved, but the group I was a part of did, which was there's something called a CNC machine, which is a big cutting machine in a manufacturing plant. And when they're doing that cutting, they make various. Sometimes a system it's set up to just go do it over and over again type of thing. But they can tell this. There was a gentleman in with one of the customers we were working with who his job was not to just be that wasn't his only job was that machine. He had lots of other things he was taking care of, but he
Yeah.
could hear and he knew, and it turned out there were 9 distinct sounds that if he heard that sound, he knew, oh, I need to go turn up the temperature in the machine, or oh, that means the speed needs to be changed, or oh, that means I need to make this adjustment. And so it would be interrupting him constantly to go attend to this thing because he would hear that sound. And also kind of just ongoingly the fact that he'd have to have that vigilance to be listening for some sound a machine would make, right? Otherwise,
Yes.
if he doesn't address it, there could be a cost because it could ruin, it could put through different things that weren't high quality, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so it's also stressful. So what they ended up doing, the team that I was working with in Microsoft, they partnered with this person to say, let's plot those, let's find the frequency decibel like combinations of all those different sounds. And then let's just set that up to be autonomous so that when it makes that sound, it just makes the adjustment you would make. And it ended
Wow.
up working. And then he
Wow.
didn't never have to worry about that again. And so I think that, and then if you can look, zoom out, because again, the slippery slope fallacy says if machine can do a task autonomously, all tasks get taken up, all jobs go away, et cetera. But
Right.
in reality, in manufacturing, especially since COVID, there's like a 30% hiring gap. They just cannot find enough human beings that will come work in these plants because now people can get jobs online or they can, reskill, or they'd rather go to Amazon where they can get, maternity or paternity leave. Even as a entry level factory worker, right?
Right.
The other manufacturers don't offer that yet. Maybe they will in the future, hopefully. But
Yes.
and then we have this interesting aspect as well of like with globalization. Now people are saying, well, in the wake of COVID, maybe we should reshore. But the labor and wage equation, if we already can't hire enough humans for the work we have now,
Yeah.
then if we're going to bring back work to the US that'll save costs and reduce emissions and all of that, we it won't be all human based. So having more automated systems and machines
Yeah.
enables us to create, because then if you think about a factory where maybe you have a lot of automated systems and machines, well, you need engineers for that
Mm.
factory. You need quality control people. You need people analyzing the data, those systems, and looking for signal in case anything's going wrong. So you actually need higher paying jobs that people can either that who better to reskill into those jobs than people that were operating the machines in the first place. So, so I think that there's a bright future, and I think that there's a lot of the work that I had been doing, and the of all of the meetings I had. So I lived 20 minutes from this thing at Microsoft called the Executive Briefing Center,
Yeah.
where they would be flying in, C-level executives from all over the world. And then they kind of have a series of briefings of like, okay, this corporate vice president from this product group is going to talk to you, and then this person. And I was one of the people that lived nearby, only 20 minutes away, that was connected to this research group. And so they would send me, and then before that, when I was in AI strategy, same thing. And so in all the companies, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies that either I or our team met with, there was literally one that wasn't headquartered in the US. But there was only one out of all of those that said, how could we could use this to cut costs, right? Like we could eliminate jobs with this. The entire rest of them were like upfront with their skepticism about working with AI was, we don't want people to be afraid for their job. We don't want to get rid of their jobs. Like
Yeah.
we feel like we owe it. Like we've made a commitment to these people. We want to keep feeding their families,
Yes.
and we're worried that you'll come in with your AI and pose a threat to that. And so they were actually defensive toward us, and we would say, hey, we're on board. Like we're
Right.
completely aligned with that. And then we start to get excited and make momentum together. But it was interesting that they would come to the table, like that'd be one of the first topics of conversation before they ever
Yeah.
got into any of the capabilities, is like, let's talk about our ethos and let's make sure we're on the same page. And so having been in those boardrooms, having been, there, feel like that's something I want to share with more people, is like, those people are thinking about that. There are some maybe, that are maybe don't share that, or maybe they're lying,
Yes.
or,
Yes.
but the vast majority, and different where I saw funds being allocated was toward purposeful augmentation of human capability rather than trying to just cut costs and eliminate jobs.
Yeah, that's so encouraging to hear because I think people are worried about that. And it's nice to know that, yeah, that their workers are their priority and they're approaching it the way that you do it, which is how can
Mhm.
we empower them? And the truth is, if companies do not adopt AI, they will fall behind and there will be no companies and no way to,
Right.
feed those families anyway. So they
Right.
have to integrate it. It's just how do you do that, like you say, with a focus on the human aspect of it.
Mhm.
Um, Talk to me about the arts because, like I said, I mean, if you could have had that career, I mean, maybe you still can, Brian. I don't know. It sounds like
Not too late.
you've had a lot of successes from the time you were 12 and then starting a company at 17. I mean, that's pretty young to be an entrepreneur. Yeah, I don't think it's too late. You're pretty young. I think not that age has anything to do with the voice. That's the beautiful part about it. But I feel like there's certain areas that I don't want to see. I don't want to see AI. So like I've played around with
Mhm.
ChatGPT. I think everyone should play around. Like I said,
Yeah.
give me a menu that gives me 30 grams of fiber a day, 80 grams of protein, these are the foods I'm allergic to. And within a second, it popped out a month of menu for
Yeah.
me, which I kept
Yeah.
tweaking until I liked it. That's amazing, right? Like that's
Yeah.
amazing. We can be
It
putting this
is.
stuff to use. The idea that teachers now are like, hey, don't you write your papers? This temptation that could be there. We don't want to, these kids are already attached to their phones. We
Yeah.
don't want them relying and losing that sense of wonder and curiosity and, innovation because it's so easy to plug in a prompt and then get something back instantaneously,
Right.
right? So
Right.
when it comes to music, and art. My daughter was telling me she was Googling, there's something called a prompt engineer to create art. So they're paying people a lot of money to be able to put in the right prompt to create the kind of
Mhm.
art that they want.
Yeah.
This is my bias. I don't want to see it in what I consider soulful, creative spaces. I feel like there's sort of a path, a higher power that guides that. That's my bias. But so I'd love your input on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think so that's interesting. I hearing your bias because we might share the same bias. I think that creating is a fundamental act, for humans, that is just wired into us, and that we are the most alive when we create. And so I think that I agree with you that there's concern there. And I think when it comes to the creative arts, I would say that I think unfortunately, I think we're entering a little bit of an era of it's a reshuffle, maybe is a good way to put it. Like, so there's this funny story when Jacques Chicard, who was he had it's an unfortunate name because it's easy to remember sometimes and hard to remember other times because it's. But anyways, Jacques Chicard, he created the automated loom that actually was the precursor to the first computer. In the what was that? I think the 1800s and or 1700s, and that he created this. And when he did, there was this outrage in Lyon, France, where he created it, and they went and they burned. He'd created three or four. They burned almost all of them, and then they were like they like ransacked his house, like they were trying to murder him,
Oh,
burn all of them
wow.
down because the weavers, the master weavers and apprentices were worried about their jobs, and they felt like it was like an assault on the art of making clothing because it could now
Mm,
we automatically weave really beautiful fabrics
yeah.
what happened instead, now we know with the benefit of history, that instead what happened was um, people that couldn't afford, the people that could afford handmade garments continued to work with the master weavers and apprentices, and they wore it as a badge of honor that they could have that. And it was a nicer material than the automatically made stuff. But the automatically made stuff meant that the cost could go down, and people who had been wearing, been in tatters and couldn't have afforded something with embroidery could suddenly afford that. And so
Yeah.
I think the same is going to happen in the art world. So I think that even the way YouTube kind of made it so that young artists who wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity to get discovered could suddenly get discovered. I think that now artists who have limitless creativity, who might not have been able to afford to buy Logic Pro or all these different advanced, like, types
Yeah.
of systems or software that you would need, will
Yeah.
be able to, with AI, be able to generate enough that they can create a form of art that is beautiful to them, and they can share with the world. And just like with everything else, like, it might not be accepted, and that people will like it or they won't. And so I think that, and then I think there will continue to be. There's been concern about the end of the orchestra, I think, for decades, right? And I think that will always continue to be, even hundreds and hundreds of years from now, when we still have symphony orchestras. People will be saying now it's the end of the orchestra. But I think the tradition will carry on, and I think that so I think that we're going to experience a shakeup in the arts of, okay, now that we can, the same, like the joke I sometimes make when people talk about AI being creative is, it's not even really a joke. It's just a statement, which is that if you trained an AI system on all the art up until the year 1900,
Yeah.
which is before surrealism, it
So
would
when you
never,
say that, and I don't mean to interrupt you, just so people
yeah,
understand, it's literally feeding them every famous artist that's ever
yeah.
lived, right?
If you,
Feeding
yeah,
it.
if
I
you
don't want
did
to use the
that,
word
yeah,
program. Let's say program. We're never going to
yeah,
use
yeah,
the word
yeah,
create.
or yeah.
We're going
It's
to input all of the
input, yeah.
art
Hmm.
that's ever existed.
If you did that, yeah, if you did
Yeah.
that, let's say for every
Yeah.
single, let's say even more than the current systems probably have inside of them, of every single one, right?
Yeah.
Between, like, from the beginning to, from cave paintings to the year 1900, that system would not create surrealism. That system would not create, like, if you look at from an artistic perspective, what it would do is it would regenerate, romanticism, and it would regenerate, like, the whatever other, and
Yeah.
any artistic forms that existed before that it was trained on,
Yeah.
it would be able to regenerate in those styles. But then if you were saying, okay, now make something impressionistic, it would say, well, I think that was after 1900, right? So whenever that was, let's say if it was trained from before that, it wouldn't be able to generate impressionistic
Interesting.
paintings. It wouldn't be able to generate
Doesn't know it. It
surrealist
hasn't been
paintings.
inputted. Yeah.
That's right. And it wouldn't be able to just create the way that we as people can create. And
Yeah.
so that's the thing, that creativity, the same way that like once we got into the digital paradigm, like the kinds of things people started making with Adobe were just mind-boggling,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so now I think there will be some people that will be leveraging AI to make new kind of interesting, synergies of different art forms that have existed. And maybe
Yes.
there'll be people who, when they do, like multimedia art, where people used to do magazine clippings and they combine that with lots of different things to layer on and make something really pretty and
Yeah.
interesting. Maybe now it'll be, okay, there's this AI generated piece here, but then I'm actually painting over it with my own, style that I'm doing, that I'm creating. And then I think that people, just like surrealism came out of, a new type of art form. I think that if in terms of painting or music, I think that there will be new, um, continue to create new art forms the way that we always have. It'll just be interesting to see kind of what it is. And I think that if anything now, people that couldn't have afforded to have a really amazing painting, or or picture that they really liked, or specifically, they love this painting, but they wish it was just a little different. Now they can generate that and print it out and have it on their wall, and now their wall, it makes them happy. So, and I think that the onus will be on artists to continue to create things that people can buy, and that it is unfortunate that the paradigms of how they can sell that is
Yeah.
changing.
Yeah.
And I also think technology companies need to be, need to take responsibility for, if people are if they're profiting off of the corpus of art that other people have made,
Right.
anything that's not in the public domain, they
Yeah.
should be accounting for and paying for those artists.
Yeah. You can see some of the ethical issues that could arise, copyright
Hmm.
infringement,
Yeah.
just any sort of, yeah, ownership. Somebody did a piece of art and then it was posted on their Instagram and then somehow it got not fed, inputted into,
Hmm.
the
Yep.
system. And then,
Don't worry, I'm not going to like
somebody's,
jump down your
no,
throat if you.
I want to, no, I think it's an important distinction because I think, like you said, if fear processes in a part of our brain that creates pain and we're using language that triggers that fear over and over, then we can't see the full application, which is why you're here today to help us understand actually how it can be good. I know Jason Bateman's sister, she has a film
Mm,
production company. And when they were doing their union negotiations, they were allowing for people were basically signing off of their likenesses. And she's like, if you want to act, you can't really give away that because then they can just use you
right,
forever. So there's
right.
legal issues, which we won't get into, there's, but we've talked a lot today about, the different applications. Where do you see like 10 years from now? Like how do you see the world impacted in a positive way by AI? Like, what are some things that I mean, we don't know for sure, but what do you envision?
Yeah, I think it's going to go down one of two paths. Either we will continue with mass industrialization and consumerism and making stuff we don't need, and sort of purposeless, right, making of things. And I think we'll be more disconnected as people, and more depressed and more on our phones and all of that. That's one path I could see us going down, that I'm certainly doing everything I can to help us avoid. The other one, I think, is one where we have leveraged these systems to, and along with purposeful choices as a society, to start moving away, like breaking up with screens in a way where the types of value that we have with, that right now, like the fact that I can have Thai food delivered to my home in 30 to 45 minutes. Right now that requires going onto a screen and clicking however many times and making choices, and versus being able to just speak to a system that just
Oh,
handles it. Because they already have my credit card information. They already know my
oh,
favorite Thai restaurant. They know my favorite order. So if I could just say to my what, let's say, if it's not a smartphone and it's some other device,
your
and I could
watch or
just say,
something. Yeah.
sure, yeah, and I could say,
Yeah.
hey,
Who
I want
knows?
that I want my favorite Thai food. It's just me eating this
Oh,
time. So get my thing or whatever. And it's just it done. Right. And it's on its way. And if you generalize that to all the different tasks where we go onto our phone, if you sort of disambiguate like what are all the reasons we go onto our phone, because once we're in that entry point, it's a slipstream onto social media and onto endless scrolling and to flipping through reels or whatever it might be. And
totally.
then that's disconnected from real human connection. And so I think also I hope for and I want us to have a renaissance toward, like, when you're in a doctor's office waiting for your appointment, like not looking around and everyone's glued to their phone. Like I want that used to be a social experiment of you strike up a conversation with a stranger, the same with at
Yeah.
a coffee shop, or when you're on a plane, you're stuck with each other for hours. So you're gonna either sleep or get to know each other, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, to me, the future that we move toward, I think, as we break down the sort of the barriers between, or break the silos between the web as our interface into all the value that machines can give us, to now I don't have to go onto a screen for the majority of these things because I have an agent that I can
Mm.
assign things, and it can go just handle something for me. If you extrapolate that in 10 years time, and if the way that we have Square now, Square came and now everyone could pay anywhere. If there's
Yeah.
a version of that is for every company that is creating an agent for that company that can then
Interesting.
negotiate with my agent that is created by maybe the same company or a different one, that now we can have agent to agent negotiation. And it's no longer, even marketing will transform, because if that agent is making the decision on which, if I say, hey, I need some toilet paper, that agent doesn't care about it, has no emotional appeal. So it doesn't care how pretty your website is. It doesn't care. It's literally just trying to find price to value, logistics, how fast it can get here. It's just making that purchasing decision for me. And
Yeah.
so the investment people are making in marketing to try to emotionally appeal to people for things will need to shift to creating even more valuable products. And then I think, as society are now have access to more information, and we're making, I think, better and better choices. We're starting to move away from like hyper sugary drinks because we know that, right? And so I can even assign to an agent saying, "Hey, I want to find, I want to do this new health kick. I want to lose this many pounds the next month. Buy all my groceries for me. Don't tell me what I'm getting. Make the meal plans. Like, I my preferences because you've seen all my Uber Eats orders and blah blah blah. Like, take care of all of it." And then it's making all that decisions. It's generating meal plans. And now I can actually, in a way that humans have struggled for a long time to actually follow through on things like that. It's another angle through which I can actually, make progress. And so that's just a couple examples. And to me, the hope of that is that we'll get back to the more human rituals of sitting down for dinner and looking each other in the face
Yeah.
without any screens, and going on picnics and going for walks and like being together as actual humans. Because I think in so much of society that's been sort of broken apart. And I'm hopeful that enough of us are seeing that we can start making purposeful decisions for what we would have to do to move back toward a future where we're more connected.
I love that. And that's the future I desire too. Do you have a minute? And if you don't, it's okay. I can cut
I
this
do.
part out. But would you mind just addressing how it could be used? Because you wrote about it a little bit in a medical model in the healthcare system, because I
Mhm.
actually
Oh
see
yeah.
this as it could be really a positive. But when you write, you said something about an example of this would be the development of a digital twin of every patient. Do you mean a physical digital twin, or
Oh
like,
no, not like a clone.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Digital twin, right? Like
Digital, actually digital.
digital,
See
fully
how my
digital. No, no,
mind
no. Yeah, no
immediately went to.
cloning. That would be,
Okay.
no, thank you.
So it could say, how would this person react to this medication or this
Exactly.
vaccine or,
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, an example of that I experienced is that my son had eustachian tube dysfunction,
hmm,
which is when your ears don't drain at birth, and so it ends up you struggle to hear. He also has permanent hearing loss, and I do too. But it made it so that he had another 20 decibels of not being able to hear until we discovered that he needed tubes at 2.5.
hmm.
And part of that was because of COVID, was during that time. So we weren't allowed to go into the hospital unless we had COVID,
Oh,
right? So,
gosh.
um,
Yeah.
but if you imagine that there was a digital twin, so I had dinner with my mother at some point after that, and then brought up, hey, it turns out Leo, my son Leo has, eustachian tube dysfunction. She said, oh yeah, you had that, I had that, we all have that. It's like,
You didn't
okay,
know.
I didn't know. And so, but how many if you think about how manual the healthcare industry is, it's
Yes.
relying on us knowing things about our ancestors and about ourselves, things that we might have experienced as newborns that we didn't even know.
Yes.
And so if you have a digital twin that has all your records of, okay, I had these tubes placed when I was born because I had eustachian tube dysfunction. And then later I had this happen. And, I when someone applied this medication, this is what happened. And when, et cetera, et cetera. And you have all those records added to an actual, like true to the biological model, of me as a person, then a doctor could say, oh, okay, this is what I'm thinking about prescribing Brian to help with whatever this thing he's going through now. And they can just quickly simulate, like, how's that going to react? And that doctor doesn't have to go pouring through all the records. They just in a instant they can say, oh no, that's going to cause severe nausea. But a similar type of, the next nearest one would be this, and we already ran the
Wow.
simulation for you, and we think his body would respond positively to that. And so we would be learning more and more about ourselves and our biology, at each visit. And then I think in order for that to be, to me, in order for it to be secure and private, if we
Yes.
had a blockchain like where I own that information, and when I come to a doctor, I give them access to my record and they can view, and their system can analyze and all of that. And then they add their notes, and then their notes are added to my blockchain, and then I take it away, and they now have no records at all of me. I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
they could have a record. Oh, this gentleman, Brian Evergreen, visited here, but that's it, right? Where all the things that they ask you at intake of, like, all your entire medical history and things like that, that's private information, right?
Yes.
And relying on you to remember all of that. And so being able to just bring that as an asset that,
Yeah.
that you can just say, it could be connected to your phone, where we're already carrying this stuff around anyway, and it has more than enough, storage on it to have that kind of information. So it could be, okay, I'm unencrypting it for my doctor, and then once they've added their information, I'm taking it back with me. And then that means I have freedom and flexibility of where I can get help. And, and also, if, a whole new class of startups could start up around, okay, if you give us access to this, we've modeled it out, we can plug in and we can give you personalized, nutrition plans, or we can
Love
we can
that.
give you, et cetera, et cetera. You can imagine. So,
Yeah, no, I think that's phenomenal. My doc, I did a telehealth visit with her and she said, can I use this AI recording thing?
oh,
And I said,
autopilot or something. Yeah.
yeah. And I said, yes. I said, well, sure, if it helps you. And she goes, well, it doesn't really help me that much. And then it says it knows your voice. And then I was like, after I was like, oh, I don't know if I should have done it, but it's too late. It now knows my voice, but so does, somebody could listen to my
Right.
podcasts and take it that way too. But yeah, I like what you're talking about because, for her, it was like it's supposed to like type up the notes from the session or
Right.
something instantaneously,
Yeah.
which I could see saving time. She didn't seem to be that excited about it, but
There's a lot of cases of that, people creating solutions to problems that people weren't necessarily looking for help with, and
right,
then a company goes, oh, we'll buy that, and then everyone has it, but no one
right.
actually is supposed to be using it is that interested.
Right, exactly. But with siloed medicine, where you're like outsource, you have a problem, they send you to this specialist, and
Yes.
nobody's talking. This is where I
Yes.
could see it being brilliant because then it's like,
Exactly.
oh, wait, your doc doesn't even know that you went to see an ENT doctor and
Right.
doesn't know that you had an
Yes.
MRI for this and doesn't realize that whatever it is, now it's all
That's right.
integrated. And then that's brilliant. That's exciting.
I think so. I mean, that's
Let's start
my
a company, Brian. Let's do it.
all
Just-
right, let's do it.
no, no, but this is where I feel like it's exciting. Like this is where I could get excited about it. Or a lot more for based on what you said. Anything that I didn't ask you today you want to add or leave the women listening with before we wrap up today?
The only thing that I would add is that I think that one thing that I think as we look at this future, right?
Yeah.
I like to talk about the future. I think probably we all do it to some degree, and I think when we look at the future, we look at problems we're facing today. The inclination is to do problem solving, right? Like, here's all these problems and let's solve them, and then we'll be in a better future. But the interesting thing is, like, the science shows that because problem solving is a craft of getting rid of what you don't want, but it doesn't necessarily get you what you do want. And so, like, for instance, if we see that screens are causing disconnection with, let's say, a child, and you smash their phone because now you've solved the problem, they can't look at the phone anymore. Are they going to be more connected to you now? Like, no, they're definitely not, right? They're going to be mad. They're going to, right? And so, so solving a problem is I think the natural inclination we have. For me, I like to talk about future solving. So picking a future that you want to be in, and then asking the question of what would have to be true for us to be in that future. And you're solving for a future instead of solving a problem, because you can go from problem to problem to problem to problem, incrementally improving things, and never get into a vastly better future that you could have gotten into if you'd first started with that end in mind and worked backwards to where you are today, saying what would have to be true for me to get there. And so that's one of the only other, like, as we're, based on everything we talked about, and as we're looking out at the, at the future, and at where this could be, if I think that if we only solve problems with AI, we're headed toward a more dystopian future, maybe, than if we do have a future solving mindset. We pick a future that we all collectively want, and then say what would have to be true for us to reach that future.
Absolutely. And if you're spearheading part of that, then everyone listening, share this with everyone and follow Brian and go get his book, Autonomous Transformation, Creating a More Human Future in the Era of AI. If you're working with companies, bring Brian in. I mean, you're creating the future that I want to live in. And I have a totally different lens than before I hit record an hour ago. So
awesome.
I'm grateful to you. You've done your, this has been fascinating, and I so appreciate your time. Where do you want people to find you? Like, where do you hang out? Where should I direct them?
LinkedIn's the easiest place to find me, or they can go to brianevergreen.com.
Perfect. And all the show notes will be over at thegoodlifecoach.com, or right on your podcast player. It's right on their phones. They can just link and get connected to you. Thanks, Brian. This has been fantastic. I so appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey friend, I have one request before we sign off today. If you've gained any value from any of the interviews that you've tuned into, would you take just 1 minute and leave a 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts? It's actually how more women can find the show, and I want to continue growing a community of women who are loving themselves and living full on. So thank you for all of your support, and I look forward to being back with you next week. Bye for now.
This podcast is presented for entertainment and educational purposes only. Any information provided is not intended to be a substitute for medical, mental health, or other professional advice. Seek out your trusted healthcare provider or other qualified professional for all matters dealing with your health and well-being. Any opinions or information provided by a guest are their own and not those of Michele Lamoureux or the company.